Good evening, everybody. I'm a little bit humbled by the turnout here. So far from the coast, it is really gratifying to find out how important British Columbians think this project is. A lot of what I normally say is covered by Andrew, so I'm going to strike out in a different direction. I have a speech written, and you're not going to get that. Normally, that's what happens to me because I generally get tagged onto the agenda at the end. So, but let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm Art Sterritt. I'm born and raised in the Upper Skeena, but I grew up in the Great Bear Rainforest. 45 years ago, I was taken there by my wife's uncle to work on a fish boat. And I arrived in an area that was rich beyond imagination. There was salmon so abundant that there was 100% employment on the coast of British Columbia at that time. There was not a person in any native village anywhere on the whole coast of British Columbia. There was salmon, there was halibut, there was black cod, there was red cod, there was everything that you could ever want was in that region, and everything was good. I married my wife a couple of years after that, and we have had 3 children, and we have fostered 3 others, and we have 16 grandchildren. I come from a family of warriors. My uncle, my namesake, Art, landed on the beaches of Normandy 3 days after D-Day, and my dad, who's now 99 years old and still drives around the Hazeltons, so be careful if you go through that. He did his time in the Second World War in Holland. And so I come from a background of people who like to stand up for what they believe in, and we've always been really proud to be Canadians, and I'm really proud tonight to be amongst the Council of Canadians. I think you guys are a pretty special bunch, so I want to thank you all for inviting me to be here. I want to talk a little bit different about this project tonight. All of the issues that you've heard Andrew talk about, all of the technical issues and all of the problems with the tar sands and everything else are one thing. But what Coastal First Nations did when this project was first presented to us, we went out and investigated what was the issue around oil. Is there something good about it, or is it all bad, or what could be the impacts of what happened? And so we spent time in Alaska. We went up and we visited with the people in Valdez, Alaska, and we found out what the ramifications of an oil spill up in that area was. 1 million barrels of oil coated Prince William Sound, an area the size of the coast of British Columbia, from the BC-Alaska border down to the bottom end of Vancouver Island. If we had a spill the size of the Exxon Valdez, that's how much of the coast we would cover. And just remember, the tankers that we're talking about for the Great Bear Rainforest are about 3 times the size of that. So that's the potential that we're looking at. We also, after the spill in the Gulf of Mexico, we went down into the Gulf of Mexico and we spent time with the head of the Louisiana Shrimp Association, who was a Cajun man. Cajuns are Acadians, as we used to call them when they lived in Canada, before they got rooted out of New Brunswick. And these are all these people that speak French, and they're real partial to First Nations and Canadians because they were once amongst us. And we also spent time with the Houma Nation, the First Nations who lived down in the Gulf of Mexico. And the one thing that everybody told us as we went through all of those areas is be really careful of oil, because if you ever let them in there, they're going to take over your culture. They have a culture of their own, and they're going to come in and they're going to take over everything that you believe in. They're going to have brothers and sisters and fighting with one another, families. They're going to divide you, and they're going to change the way you live forever. Well, as a First Nations person, having a history that goes back about 10,000 years on the coast, and a strong art form and everything else, you guys saw 3 of the totem poles that I carved were part of the show that you saw earlier. You saw my nephews and nieces dancing and all of those kinds of things. I wasn't particularly concerned about oil coming into the coast of British Columbia and kind of changing our culture. I thought we're pretty strong. We've got our languages and we've got everything. But it wasn't long before I started to realize that as the federal government and Enbridge started to make their way within the Great Bear, that indeed the thing that we had to worry about most was our culture. That these people were proposing something that would change the way we live forever. And coastal First Nations, for the last dozen or so years, have developed a plan along with all of the other people in the Great Bear region. And when I say the other people, I'm talking about the environmental community, I'm talking about industry, I'm talking about municipal leaders, I'm talking about unions, I'm talking about everybody. Everybody that lives and breathes and works in the Great Bear rainforest. We gathered them all together and we developed a plan for what we wanted this area to look like over the next 100 years or so. And so we have a plan. That plan exists. And it's a good plan. And that plan is based on sustainability. It's based on us living in harmony with our environment, which is what all of us need to do. The people who live in the Great Bear depend on everything that comes out of the ocean, everything that comes off of the land. And while all of you do as well, we live it every day. If we want fish, we get in our boat and go out and get it. If we want a halibut, we jig it. If we want seaweeds, we go out and pick it. So we are living in harmony with our environment. Over the last 30 years or so, the economy in the Great Bear has gone downhill pretty drastically. So salmon have been tested, abalone stocks have been wiped out by mismanagement, and all kinds of things like that. But we think that we've stopped the eradication of resources in the Great Bear just in time. We think that the forests there are now sustainable, that the fish are sustainable, and they're actually coming back. And so when we do that, what we look at is kind of a small microcosm of British Columbia. Because British Columbia is basically the same thing. When you look at the larger audience of BC, we really are a sustainable province. We don't depend on oil. We don't depend on gas. You know, we have a renewable forest industry that provides thousands and tens of thousands of jobs and billions of dollars. And we have 30,000 jobs on the coast of British Columbia and $2.5 billion a year in revenue that depend on a sustainable environment. We have food that we grow. Everybody here understands full well that all of the food that we eat comes out of the earth. And we need healthy water, and we need healthy lands, and we need all of those things to survive. So what we've seen in the Great Bear, and why the coastal First Nations have declared this area a no-tanker zone, is because this project, if allowed to go through, and one accident would wipe out everything that we have all worked for, not just for the last dozen or so years, but what has been there for 10,000 years, and for the last 150 years since non-native people arrived on the coast of British Columbia. We've kind of lived in harmony, but we've tested our environment seriously. But we are at a point now where we are drawing back on that, and we're learning to live in harmony. But what has happened is we found ourselves being affronted by a culture that has no conscience. A culture that will bribe the weakest amongst us. It'll call down those of us that are trying to stop this. It tries to demonize anybody that speaks out against this. It's absorbed our federal government, and it's certainly absorbed most Albertans, except for Andrew and a few others. But it really is a culture that will overcome us. And if we ever allow this culture to absorb us in British Columbia, it'll be all over. There is no turning back once you allow this culture to change your culture. And when I come into an area like this and I walk up and down the streets and I see the wealth that you have here, you certainly do mining, but you do it in a more sustainable way. You have sustainable energy. You have farms, you have horses, you have cows, you have all kinds of things that help sustain you. There's lots of arts and lots of crafts. And when you have that, you know that you're living in a very strong culture. So what we're looking at in this issue is a government and an industry that is trying to change the whole culture of British Columbia. And really what we need to do is we need to stop them at the border. If we do not do this, we are going to change the face of British Columbia and Canada forever. So I tell my grandchildren, I have a 9-year-old grandson who says to me, "Papa, are you going to be able to stop these people?" And I say, we have to. We absolutely have to. And so they wonder why. My grandchildren wonder why I'm not home with them, why I'm off into the Kootenays and talking to people in Nelson and traveling into Trail and all kinds of other places. And I tell them it's to save the Great Bear Rainforest, it's to save the whales, it's to save the bears, it's to save everything that we all depend on in that region. We have a culture that has the most advanced art form in the world. The art that you see on my clothing, I'm an eagle, by the way. Every First Nations person in the Great Bear belongs to a clan. You're either an eagle or a raven or a killer whale or a wolf. And everybody in the Great Bear their clan is determined by their mother. We live in a matrilineal society. Everything flows out of our mother. And everything that we eat flows out of Mother Earth. And that's the belief that the people that live in the Great Bear have. And that's why they're fighting so hard. They're fighting for their lives. One spill in the Great Bear Rainforest wipes us out completely. It diminishes us into poverty. Because right now, despite the fact that we have no jobs, there's 15% of us have jobs. But despite the fact that we have that, we don't live in poverty. We're able to go out and get everything that we need to sustain ourselves. And that's the thing that people don't understand. And that's the thing that I think people in Alberta and Ottawa don't understand about British Columbia. We live in a half province here. We contribute to the rest of Canada. We're at the lead of creating a sustainable environment. The Great Bear Rainforest represents 25% of the coastal temperate rainforest left on planet Earth. Every year, the Great Bear Rainforest absorbs 2.5 million tons of carbon dioxide. It takes that carbon and it sequesters it, it puts it into the trees and into the ground, and it spits the oxygen back out for us to breathe. That's what this small area does. And British Columbia on a larger scale does exactly the same thing. But people don't look at it that way. They think, we've got to get this economy going. Somewhere along the line, we got the idea in this industrial revolution that we're at kind of at the tail end of, that we were the masters of this planet. Well, we're not the masters of this planet. We're not the masters of planet Earth. We're the masters of our fate. If we allow this project to go through, we will determine what our fate will be. We will be beholden to oil. We will leave our children and our grandchildren with a legacy that is not sustainable. The earth is the source of all capitalism. The natural capital that this earth gives to us and the income that comes out of it is what really sustains all of us. What we do with these non-renewables is lunacy. When we consider these to be the thing that drives our economy, the things that really don't sustain us, oil does not provide us with food. It doesn't provide us with oxygen. It doesn't provide us with water. It doesn't provide us with any of the necessities of life. But it has the potential to destroy all of those things. And that's why it's so important that you people and anyone else that I can talk to or anybody else in British Columbia stands up for this. Because we really are on trial here. Democracy is on trial. Because oil around the world has taken democracy and turned it inside out. And that's what we're seeing here. We are fighting for democracy in British Columbia. We need to change the way that we're thinking. And I know that most of you have already done that. I'm absolutely amazed that people living as far away from the coast would believe so much in stopping this project. I think you guys get it. Andrew answered the question about what can you do. And the reality is that you guys are already doing it. You're here tonight. And I heard the challenge that was put out to you to go on a caravan. And the more different people that show up and express their disgust or their opposition to this project, the more likely we are to stop this. And First Nations have a few other tools in the toolbox. British Columbia has Aboriginal title on it. And Aboriginal title can be used as some kind of a club to beat industry down if it's needed, but it can also be used as a feather. And most of us, as coastal First Nations, choose to use that as a feather. A feather of peace so that we can live in harmony with our environment. And that's what we're going to offer up. We're going to offer up the ability to go to court and stop this government. If we can't stop them at the border, these rights that we talk about are not, they're not to be taken lightly. We don't take them lightly. These are, a lot of people in the rest of Canada, and even the Prime Minister thinks that if you talk to First Nations, you consult with them a little bit, you can go ahead and do whatever you want, offer them a couple bucks, give them a little equity share of the pipeline. It doesn't work that way. When a project comes along that has the ability to literally wipe Aboriginal rights and title off the face of the earth, then we have to approve that. We cannot allow that to happen, and First Nations will never allow that to happen. The Supreme Court of Canada said, but we would love to just have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of British Columbia show up. It'd be a lot better to save our money for developing our resources to make sure that we live in harmony with one another, rather than wasting it in the courts. It'd be a lot better that if we didn't have to stand up and get in front of the bulldozers. And the way that we do that, and this is the one lesson that we were told when we were in Alaska and when we were in Louisiana and Mississippi and Florida and all of those areas, all of those people in those areas said, you've got to get the people to rise up. You've got to stop oil from consuming you while you have the chance. And so that's what we're coastal First Nations are out there trying to do. We're trying to get as many people as we can. Currently, all of the polls that we have out there right now have said that 80% of British Columbians are against tanker traffic on the coast of British Columbia. 55% of Canadians are against tanker traffic on the coast of British Columbia. We have brought together a group of Canadians, a group that we're calling Canadians for the Great Bear. And we have people like Scott Niedermeyer, Captain Canada. He's the captain of our team. And we have Robin Allen, who you heard Andrew talk about, a great economist. She's part of that team. And I was just looking tonight at there's a fellow in Afghanistan, a soldier who was meeting with the Afghanis, and he took his helmet off out of respect for those people, and a young Afghani came and chopped his head in half. Literally split his brain. And this young man survived, and he is coming back. He's getting stronger every day. And he is so mad at this government for characterizing what's going on in British Columbia as terrorism, because he was out there fighting real terrorism. And so he has agreed to join Canadians for the Great Bear, and he wants to help us go after this government to make sure that we can push this back. So we have former ministers of fisheries like Tom Sitton and John Fraser and all kinds of people. It doesn't matter what your stripe. Democracy affects all of us, whether you're liberal or conservative or New Democrat or whatever you might be. We're all on trial here. And if we don't stop this project, ladies and gentlemen, we're in serious trouble. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening.